Hello, everyone, and welcome to Zergratran's discussion with investors. For those of you who have been joining us earlier, I think you know a lot about Zergratran and our PILA project. But for all of you who join us for the first time, I'd like to share with you that the Zergratran is an innovative and sustainable high-capacity transportation company. And we're building the world's first tunnel to expedite shipping goods between the North Atlantic and the North Pacific. So in a way, two ports and a tunnel in between that will be using a magnetic levitation technology to transport the shipping containers. And in doing so, our goal is to offer faster, smarter, safer, and cheaper solutions to existing alternatives. I'd like to thank today our investors who join us for this video session, Maduka Chidebelu-Eze and Hari Gopal. Thank you for joining us. And I think it would be better to ask you to introduce yourself than to me to talk about your amazing accomplishments and also your decision to join Zergratran as investors. So Maduka, would you like to go ahead first and introduce yourself?
Sure. As you said, Maduka Chidebelu-Eze. I'm CEO of Connector, and I've been involved in a few infrastructure projects in the telecommunications space. And I thought that participating in this project was of particular interest because of the region in which it supports and the impact it's going to have in the region. And so once this was introduced to me, I was quick to evaluate it and was excited to be a part of the project.
Thank you so much. I remember when we talked for the first time and I asked you, what was the motivation? How did you decide to invest in Zergratran? That you told me about a very interesting platform that you used to assess the company. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that as well.
Yes.
Thank you. Hari, welcome. And please introduce yourself as well.
Thank you very much, Karina, and thank you, Maduka. Interesting to hear about your background. I have a background in finance, and mostly I've done work in the area of corporate finance, working for companies in different parts of the world. I worked and lived in India, in Indonesia, and here in the US for the last several years. So most of my background has been, as I said, in looking at individual companies and ensuring that finances leveraged properly to help a company to accomplish its goals. And so that's the area. Now, for the last 5 years, I've been pretty much on my own as a consultant, and I run my own company. It's a technology investment company. And so when I came across this opportunity, it was intriguing, and it took me a while to better understand its attractions. And now, as a part of the company and as an investor, I'm very happy to be here and keen to discuss a little more with you.
Thank you. Thanks for introducing yourself. We usually like to bring investors to share their thoughts, their experience with Zergratran, because we believe that this is really a valuable feedback for everybody else who's assessing Zergratran as an opportunity to invest, but also for people who want to find out a little bit more about PILA, the location where the project will be happening, the structure of the ports, the tunnel as well, the change that it brings to the industry. But also we're focusing on the change and the impact that it made in the community in North Colombia, and how with this project we will be impacting environment, social, community, but then as well economical growth. And so we have a couple of questions. Let's just have a conversation about that. Would love to hear your thoughts. So I'll just start with your personal experience and personal thought about what thoughts you had when when you actually look at the Zergratran project as itself? What motivated you to invest?
I can start. Yeah, so the Zergratran, the challenges involved in such a ambitious project made me want to be a part of it, because you realize that obviously there are challenges. Some would think that they may be overwhelming, but we have to do the work to be able to solve problems. And we have a big problem in regards to logistics and shipping, and being able to get products from A to B in an efficient manner. And we find that this project solves problems for the shippers, and it brings commerce to the region. It is sustainable, actually it goes beyond sustainable as a project. And so the reasons why I invested had everything to do with the values and the impact associated with the project, besides the engineering challenge that it brings, which is exciting. I was already in the space evaluating ways to bring commerce to regions in areas that are underserved, or I would say underdeveloped. And so in looking at that, understanding that foreign investment and investment in infrastructure is the key to be able to drive that circular economy, for me, it was a no-brainer to be able to be a part of the infrastructure investment in the region in Central and South America and Africa. That's what I'm interested in first. And this fits that model, which is one of the reasons why I was very interested in becoming a part of the project.
And Maduka, that's very interesting, because you are actually tying together the investment with making sure that underdeveloped parts of the world gets an opportunity to be part of a bigger project, where the project itself is building a long-term beneficial environment. And that's something that is really interesting to hear from you, because not so many investors that we have been talking to have that long-term vision of making sure when I invest something, this is actually going to be a long-term and a project where we usually say when we build it, it will stay there for hundreds and hundreds of years and produce benefits, not just for the region, but globally as well, by changing the industry. So that's a great thought. We'll come back to that as well. Again, I just want to here's some thoughts from Harry. Harry, what was your thought process in your decision making when you first time heard about Zergratran and the opportunity?
Well, the first time I heard from Byron was actually in October 2021. So Byron reached out to me on LinkedIn and gave me a little bit of a summary on the project. And at that time, I was active with, the kind of companies that I was looking for had a completely different criteria. The investment thesis at that time that I was looking at was really very small investments, multiple investments, and in the SaaS space, and looking at B2B solutions in the SaaS space. So it didn't meet my criteria on many levels, in terms of the time of the return, in terms of the scale of the investment, in terms of SaaS technology. And so my initial reaction was to get back to Byron and say, look, this is interesting, but I'm not interested because it doesn't fit my investment thesis. I want to stick to my business. And so I responded back to him, something that I've done with a lot of opportunities that come my way. And I thought I heard the last of it from Byron, but Byron was very persistent. Byron kept sending me information periodically and trying to reach out to me and said, you know what, let's have a conversation around this. So fast forward, January, February 2022, my work, I moved away from, I expanded my thinking into energy, and I was doing more of energy work for corporates, looking at trying to sell energy solutions, both sustainable as well as, other types of energy solutions for large corporate clients. And I became more and more aware and interested in sustainable solutions. And when I, talking to corporates and talking to people, senior leaders and companies of large chemical companies and oil companies and so on and so forth, I came to the realization that many of the goals of, our Paris climate goals were very challenging, on a macro level. So the themes that I heard from individual managers was, look, it's all right for us to cut down our emissions, but on a macro basis, these are very difficult, and we really need to be attacking some things on a macro level, like the electric car. Something has to be done on a macro level in order to support what the companies are doing at an individual level. So that kind of opened up my mind. And the next time Byron reached out to me, I told them, let's have a conversation. I want to better understand what you're doing. And so for me, the first thing that attracted me, the first feature of the project that made me interested was the macro environmental impact. Just the thought of how many ships, instead of having to traverse the whole thing and go around the ships that, cannot go through the Panama Canal. So the data that struck me was only 3% of the ships that are that have to go from North Pacific to the North Atlantic, only 3% of them can go through the Panama Canal. So what about the remaining 97%? They have to circumnavigate and go around, and the energy cost and the environmental impact and the pollution is so huge that if building an alternative is going to create such a positive environmental impact. So this project seemed to me one of the macro solutions that a lot of people were reaching out to me. So for me, the first thing before I looked at anything was to better understand the environmental impact. And that is what motivated me to get into a conversation with Byron. And so from February or so of that year up until June, July, I'm an accountant. I take my own time. It's not something that I can be hurried. And so I took some time to better understand, and so then I started engaging with him and with the team. And once I met with the team and I listened to the people, then it made sense to me on all fronts. The scope of the project, the value proposition of the project, both in terms of the macro and in terms of the micro impact, and then the financial viability. So from all of those counts, it excited me, and then I became a committed investor, and I've been involved in the project since then. So that's kind of my story in terms of what brought me into the project and into this team, both as an investor and now as a director.
And that's a great story. Thanks for sharing. You're right. It is very difficult to change the industry, and every industry is like that. If there's any new project that comes in, we've seen the challenges around being able to change step by step what needs to be done, because obviously this has been done. The ships are transporting containers for hundreds and hundreds of years, and so to change the way how the industry works in the system within is very challenging. And there has not been any company that has come up to the market with this kind of solution. And beside what you said, you learned a lot of market challenges. 3% of the ships can go through the canal. The Suez Canal is more, has more business, and there's more ships going through that part of the world. It doesn't mean that it strategically has a better position. We believe that even higher number of ships can go through the tunnel once it's built in North Colombia. But it is just the way how the industry needs to change. And specifically what we see, there's lots and lots of big companies and the smaller startups that are coming up with new products. All of them are focusing, when we look at the supply chain, on a shipping industry as helping them to disperse the products. And this is when the first time when I hear that, I'm thinking, have you ever done the research and do you know what's happening in the shipping industry? And so we want to make sure that we help those who know what's happening and also those who are not aware of the biggest problem. So a couple of things that you mentioned on, and I fully agree. But one thing that I'm also very interested from your site is, what was that you have seen as the biggest benefit as being invested in Zergratran?
So for me, there are two huge benefits of being an investor in Zergratran. I think it's, for one, if you look at the scope of the project, the way I look at the scope of the project, it's huge. We're talking about multi-billion-dollar investment, both in terms of the capital, but also in terms of the impact. I see the impact on multiple dimensions. Clearly, the impact on logistics, on shipping, images of long lines outside Long Beach, outside Suez Canal, outside the Panama Canal have been surfacing on the media for the last year and a half, ever since the fiasco in Suez Canal. So that image is very strong. And I think for us to be able to provide a solution, it's very inspiring. So at the one level, the ability to provide a real tangible solution to a problem that everybody feels. The supply chain problem is something that hurts everyone. It's not something that is esoteric and it's restricted to anyone. It's something that everyone feels. And so the opportunity to provide a solution is very inspiring. The environmental impact, the amount of green gas that we are cutting because of this is also, inspiring. And I think there's a third dimension. Very often, at least in the kind of businesses that I worked in, it's a micro, it's a firm. We invest, we want to make sure that we are able to generate returns for our shareholders and our stakeholders. And so the impact is somewhat limited. I'm not trying to belittle the goals. I think they are very important goals, but I think they are limited in scope. Certainly at the time that I was actively working as a corporate leader in many companies. This one has an opportunity to go above and beyond that. What I'm talking about here is the potential impact in the society in Colombia where we are operating. The social impact is huge. I think it can be huge, positive in terms of jobs that it creates, in terms of the infrastructure that it creates. So for me, the motivations are at multiple levels. As an investor, I see all of these things, and the opportunity in whatever small manner, the opportunity to be a part of this and to do your part to enable this to happen is I consider it to be a once in a lifetime opportunity. And so once I understood the scope of the project and what we were trying to accomplish, those were some of the reasons, specific reasons. And obviously the financial return. I do believe that the project, as it gathers momentum, as the project becomes more and more, we start accomplishing the different goals, the project will also be more and more financially attractive. So both as a financial investor, but also as a social entrepreneur, I think this project meets all of the criteria, and there are not many projects that can meet with that criteria. So for me, those are some of the specifics, if that answers your question.
Thank you, Harry. You touched on so many different points from the social perspective, but economical as well. Profit is also an important part of the overall benefits, and we believe that those two ports and a tunnel in between, in a way, using the magnetic levitation carriers for the containers will be a revenue generator for years to come, and specifically beneficial for those who join at the beginning. But Maduka, what's your opinion about the whole thing? What was the beneficial thing that actually attracted you to this?
There are so many, but let me start with this. The introduction to Byron was through the circle of trust, right? And so when I did speak to Byron, and he passionately explained what he was trying to do and why. Getting to meet the founder and the leader of the vision, it guided my intuition a bit, right? And so people that I trusted introduced me to the project. Obviously, that's typically how it works. But there's so many challenges with what was introduced. When he started talking about a tunnel, that's, first of all, that's a challenge in itself. And then maglev technology to move containers from one port to the other, that's a challenge in itself. All right. When you start looking at the proposed or theorized solutions, you start thinking about the potential for innovation as a result of the challenges you encounter through this entire project, and with reduced environmental impact. So now we're talking about a tunnel. We're not cutting down trees through the forest. We're digging underneath them, and with the hope of preserving as much of the forest as possible, and keeping things as pristine as possible. But then, you know, obviously there will be some impact, but it's reduced, accomplished. And I think the other thing would be the community building, the social impact, we would say. For me, the biggest thing is being able to improve the middle class and make life better for whatever companies we're invested in or we support, that the people that support it benefit from it. And as Harry had mentioned earlier, it's going to generate a lot of jobs. There are going to be a lot of opportunities. A lot of companies will be birthed out of this, which will hopefully increase the GDP of the region, right? And so when you look at it in terms of the macro impact, what we're actually doing is extremely small, but it has a long-lasting impact on the region, has a long-lasting impact on how shipping is done. We will change some things with this PILA project. Here's what I found. But the expectation is that it will affect other shipping technologies around the world. So we're starting here. This is the first project. And to be a part of that early, it's almost like being a pioneer, right? It's almost it's an adventure, right? And so there's great responsibility going in first or early into something like this. And you hope that with the values that you have, and with the intentions that you have, that you would have some impact on how decisions are made. And if I don't do it, if Harry doesn't do it, then who will, right? So we look at the opportunity. If the opportunity makes sense, if the opportunity has a positive impact on the region, if the opportunity is profitable and opportunity, it betters the lives of people, then I want to be a part of that.
This was really great. I love how you mentioned, again, the social part, because it's really important to us. What do we build along the way as in regards to the community in that part of the world, because this is just the first project. Today, we had our weekly team meeting, and we also talk about scaling up, a possibility about moving to different regions. And yes, creating more jobs. And this is all, aside from impacting the industry, this is all benefits to the region, to the project as well. And I think us who are part of that, having enough experience in our lives, we know that there's a part of every project that is beneficial. But there's also that part that is challenging and might be concerning as well. So, and I'm sure that through your thought process and decision making, you had those as well. And we want to make sure, I really like you to share some of the things that in your mind were maybe challenging about the project or maybe concerning. I would like other people to hear about that as well, who will be listening to this. And also if you can share, how did you go around that?
Okay, I can start. So I used, my company has established a way to assess businesses and their relationships between businesses and investors, and to help guide their intuition. And so I used it on myself. And so in this case, I did take a look at Zergratran, and we looked at its feasibility, the utility, its leadership, sustainability. We also looked at, you know, whether it existed or not, and all that, due diligence. And we give it a score in different areas. And upon investigating and taking a look at Zergratran, it just checked off a lot of things, but the challenges were simple. Obviously, massive project that required a lot of capital upfront, which means that the investor would have to be in it for the long term. Okay. The other thing was the impact on the region. Took a look at that. Obviously, depending on the solution that is used to be able to move product from one end to the other, the impact on the ports and the impact on the transportation system on the region. Obviously, the goal is to minimize impact, which kind of reduce that risk, but there's still a risk there. The other thing I looked at as a risk was the government and the relationships, right? So given that Zergratran had already received some go ahead through the agency that governs infrastructure at the time, ANI, that helped reduce that risk, right? And so the pre-visibility and feasibility requirements that we still need to go through, but understanding that the government in some form was behind the project helped reduce that risk. Now, going in early, there's always going to be risk anytime you invest early, but the reward is significant on so many different levels. So in this case, upon doing that and scoring, I have a KBCI that I used to score, and I scored the company, and it was favorable and matched my values, and we moved forward. Okay. The system helped reduce my risk aversion, understanding that it was a long-term investment. Now, like I said earlier, I started early with the fact that there are going to be challenges, and that's understood. But we put the smart enough people together. The technology already exists. It's just a matter of engineering now. It's a matter of bringing the systems together, right, to make it work for the purpose that it's set out to. And so I'm an engineer. So being an engineer, I understand this. It seems simple. Obviously, there's some processes and, you know, fundamental guidelines that need to be taken in regards to putting a product together. And we understand that there are difficulties there as well, lots of hurdles. But these are not hurdles that cannot be overcome with the right minds, right? And we need investors to come in that are excited about the project, that have something to bring as well to help overcome some of these challenges with their relationships and with their partnerships, because this is going to be one of the key things I had indicated on my review, was that it was going to require key partnerships to be successful. And so I believe, given all the meetings that we've had, I've been attending the board meetings and the investor meetings, and the understanding is that this group and this team is very keen on smart partnerships for this project, and that has definitely helped. What's the term? It's helped reinforce my assessment in terms of, okay, we understand that partnerships are needed, and that is what the team is actually focused on. And good investment partnerships is key for success, and we're believing that those will come.
Completely agree with you, and thank you for the great assessment. And you're right, there's nothing in the world that a person can do or a company by themselves. An important strategic collaboration and partnerships are key for success. So we are doing that as well with your help and with the team's help. So that's very, very important. Hari, what's your specific thinking about the challenges and some risk while you were assessing the Zergratran as an opportunity to invest in?
So I call them challenges rather than risks, because every project is fraught with risk. Risk is something that we have to see. The question is, I saw three major challenges in this project, and I see three major challenges. They're still there. So the first one for me as a finance guy is finance. So the challenges that I saw in finance was the sheer size of the project, multiple billions of dollars. And then the time, how long is it going to take before I start seeing a return? I think these were very important concerns for me. And then I looked at technological and engineering challenges. Does the technology exist to do something like this? We talked about maglev, and what if the technology doesn't materialize? And then the engineering challenge, how are we going to build this, even assuming the technology is there? So these are some of the thoughts that went through my mind. And then clearly, we have to be cognizant of the political risk. We are talking about a region that is not very well understood, the region that has a certain amount of bad press around it. So Colombia, what are we going to do? At least the initial project is going to be in Colombia. PILA project is situated in Colombia. So these were the three buckets of challenges that I identified, and how I addressed them, was clearly in the course of communication with Byron and the team, and also reading up and understanding a little more. A lot of the challenges and risks come because of our own ignorance. So because when we don't know something about it, there's a void, and then we tend to fill it up with the worst case scenario. And so part of my challenge was, my approach was to read up more and talk to more people and listen to more materials. And so in terms of finance, one of the things that came to mind, how I address the size issue, why I think the size is not a major constraint, is the way the project has been constructed. The way Byron explained to me is that we are attempting this project in steps. There are key steps. There is a pre-feasibility step, which is, it's a few, tens of millions of dollars or even less than that. So we have a pre-feasibility step. And I think once we clear the pre-feasibility, we reach a certain milestone, and then we are able to get to the next level, which is the feasibility study. Once we finish the pre-feasibility, and then we have more concrete support from the government of Colombia. And then once we have that, a lot of the credentials of the project are established. And at that point in time, I expect many people to be knocking on the doors wanting to make the investment. So in my mind, I don't look at this as a multi-billion-dollar project. This is a series of projects where if we manage to execute it well at each stage, it's going to make it so much more easier for the financing to come through. So that is how it's not like we need all of this money on day one. So it's in the way the project has been structured, it's very manageable and very much proven each step that we are able to prove, and therefore it's going to make it easier for us to obtain the financing. So I don't, that is how I look at the financing part of it. In terms of the returns on the project, originally I thought that the revenues were going to start coming in when the project is completed, which is going to take several years. Probably we are looking at 7-8 years. But then later, when I got to understanding the project, the way the operations are going to be done, the way there are a lot of opportunities for generating revenue on the project before the canal is open and before we start moving ships between the North Pacific and the North Atlantic. These are, during the construction phase, we're going to excavate a lot of earth. We're going to generate a lot of material. We're going to create infrastructure on either ends. All of the infrastructure is going to start, creating opportunities for revenue generation for shipping companies, for logistics companies, and other, people who are invested in this. And the third thing, to me, that the most exciting thing is that we'll be creating so many new innovations, in terms of the software and the knowledge that we need in order to execute this. And I think these are areas where many shipping companies and logistical companies are going to be interested in. Simple things starting like, how do we better track containers? What is inside the container? What are the aspects of the contents of the container that are interesting to shippers and other people? So there's a lot of areas that we can start generating revenue. And I think we are going to be in a unique position where we're going to be looking at this from so many different angles that we'll be in a unique position to bring solutions that are not only going to help us, but also going to help a lot of other people who are invested in this business, shippers and managers, customs managers, governments. So there are so many ways in which we can generate revenue by licensing the technology. So for me, the revenue became less of a concern because, a very early stage, we're going to be able to start creating products and services that is going to be of value to people. And so that's how I look at the finance, and I was assured that the finance was a challenge that can be managed, and it was addressed. From a technological and an engineering perspective, I understand that most of the technologies exist. It's not like we are dependent on something that does not exist. So that was a big relief for me. So it moved from the research to an implementation. It's not like we need to do fundamental research and get some breakthrough technologies. It's not that. Technologies exist. So it's a question of scaling up. From an engineering perspective, there are two aspects which provided assurance to me. One is that clearly we'll be going with world-class companies. If you're talking of tunnel boring machines, or if you're talking of any equipment, we are going to go with people who are the best of the best in the world. And therefore, a lot of the risks are, are mitigated by going to the people who are the best in the company. And then on the other thing, from a project management perspective, I like the culture of bringing in the project management team very early on. We have project management people on the calls. We have an on-ground team that is ready to execute. So for me, the project management team is equally important. And so that is how we address the risks relating to the technology and the engineering part of the project, which is it's a significant challenge, but I think it's something that has been managed well, and there are good plans in place to address that. Last but not the least, the political thing is there is still an uncertainty, because we don't control. But I think the approach and the philosophy that I'm hearing is let's focus on the benefits of the project, and let's make sure that we stay true to the value that is created by the project. And let's engage with everyone. We are not going to be engaging with only one part of the organization. We want to engage with people who are in the economics, departments, in the ministries. We're going to engage with people who are involved in environmental issues. We're going to talk to people who have concerns around social issues. So I think having an open mind and focusing on the revenue benefits of the project is going to help us to deal with the political risk. So I think we have a a very robust approach to all of the challenges. And that is how I overcame what I thought were some of the challenges. And I'm now comfortable and confident that we can deal with all of these challenges successfully.
Thank you so much, Harry. I think investors can really get a lot of information from both of you for conducting a deep and very qualitative analysis of the project before going ahead and deciding to join Zergratran. One of the things that really we had on our mind is that there's a lot of investors who are not familiar with specific infrastructure projects or maybe emerging markets. And so investment in different industries and emerging markets, it's something new. It is, a lot of people have appetite for it. It's a good investment opportunity from the ESG standpoint and financial as well. But you have invested in the major infrastructure project in Colombia. What do you see and how do you see it? How would you describe to an investor who is thinking about, should I invest in a project that will be happening in North Colombia? And you both mentioned the political questions possible, infrastructure, governmental, although we know that we are collaborating at this point with the government, and we know that we do have a written support and letter where you mentioned, Harry, the pre-feasibility. Once that's done, in collaboration with the government and support from the Colombian government, we have automatic go ahead to start working on feasibility study. And so as investors in emerging markets and new technologies, what would you say to investors who are contemplating if this is a good project for them?
I'll say the project has done the work. The team has done the work to go through the appropriate channels to ensure that the company is structured properly and has the backing and will have the backing given its foundation. Getting the SEC registration was one of those huge hurdles that ensures that investors are protected, right? At least with the intention of protection. And so as long as Zergratran continues to use those models to ensure that its foundation is established with good relationships with regulations and governmental officials, it's going to be given a chance to succeed. Okay, and so in dealing with emerging markets, you just have to make sure that you are set up appropriately in that region, right? There are always going to be challenges because it's an emerging market, okay? But business is there to be had. The fact that there's an opportunity where it's needed means that you're going to have and should have higher returns for the risk or the challenge you have chosen to solve, okay? So yes, there's a lot of thought that goes into it, but if you look at the company for what it is, its structure, it's partnerships, it's how it abides by regulations, and and you look at it business, it's the makeup of its team and the feasibility of the proposal and project itself. Then it should help with the risk aversion for you to be able to jump in on the project. But that's typically what you have to look at in emerging markets. And in this case, being able to support this would also help other emerging markets that also need an infusion of foreign investment. I see it as driving a circular economy. And so there's an engine that needs a starter, and we need starters in these regions for those economies to thrive. So If you want to make a difference in those regions of the world, then projects like Zergratran's are the projects you want to invest in.
Thank you, Maduka. These are all very, very important points that you mentioned. So thanks for that. Harry, anything on your side? Anything specific about the emerging market?
Yeah, to a potential investor, I'll pick up where Maduka made. I think Maduka made a very important point. The last point to me was very, very interesting. If you want to make a difference, so where I'll start with a potential investor is clearly all investors, potential investors, I'm sure, are aware of the climate change, the challenge that the world is facing. And I think they should be concerned about what they can do to make the world a safer place for the future generations. So this is a modest investment. Investing in projects like this is a very concrete way by which you are able to create a macro impact. Doing things on a micro level in your house, in your car is good, and we have to continue that. But you also have to make a macro change so that you're able to bring about, quantum leaps. We have to make something significant. So this is a great way to support a project where the environmental impact is going to be positive, and I think it's a way of contributing to future generations. I think that's an important part. From a financial point, I'll always come back to the financial because I am a finance guy. I think from a financial point, the way you want to think about it is, as we go through, we are going to create value. I think the focus should be on value. The value that we are creating, the knowledge that we are building, the infrastructure that we are building, the plans that we're putting in place. As we go through the project, we're going to continue to create value. And I think as an investor, I would say that so long as we are creating the value, in the company, it is something that protects the interest of the investor. So I think those would be my two words to any potential investor to consider investing in Zergratran seriously.
Thank you, Hari, as well. I would like to add that at this point, we are actually working with U.S. Development Agency, with directors and managers who are leading the North, South America and Colombia as well, working with them really closely, and with the Colombian government directly, and with investment in Cartagena, different economic development agencies in Colombia, the chambers of commerce, really trying to connect with every possible organization and association to make sure that we fully align with their mandates and their environmental planning and strategic plans, but as well showcasing the wealth and impact overall projects when we start working in that part of the world. We really believe in that, bringing a positivity in the social aspect, but also building that region, building their GDP, opening new jobs, and making sure that we all know when the region has a lot of jobs and people have jobs, that region is healthier, the community is healthier, the schools are built, and so the overall impact is really, really large. Along with that, when we talk about sustainability, and you both mentioned, if you want to make a change, impact investment is something that we have been talking a lot in the last couple of years, but impact investment has been there for so many years. A lot of people are investing because that specific project fully aligns with their personal values. And when we look at PILA, we're actually building the first green corridor that is changing historically how shipping and supply chain has been done. And when thinking about that green corridor, the Zergratran started more than 3 years ago in thinking what would be the best way to help out, but it will change the way how ocean have been affected, air, environment, and everything goes along the way when we know that the ships are waiting for 10 to 12 days idling in the port. The supply chain has been, as an industry, has been impacted a lot. So when we look at the impact investment, what do you think on a individual personal level your opinion about what role does impact investment have in your decision making? And if we're thinking about the people who are looking at Zergratran and PILA project, what would you tell them? What is the impact of Zergratran in that whole portfolio when we look at the impact investments? Any of you can go ahead.
Yeah, let me, I think increasingly impact investment is becoming a feature of how I manage investments. So even on my regular investment accounts, I try to focus on ESG goals, look at things in terms of representation, support those resolutions which improve the diversity on the boards of companies, and try to avoid certain industries which are against my own principles and values. So I think we are all becoming more aware, and we are certainly more empowered today to influence investments at a micro level. Certainly at a macro level, organizations are becoming more and more vocal, but I think at an individual level, we are able to do that. So continuing that trend, investing in Zergratran is a way to make an impact investment, because it concerns sustainability, which is very, very important. It's critical. It's no longer a nice to theme. It's critical for us to manage that. So this is a great opportunity to make a very specific impact investment in a specific company. And I think the impact is going to be significant. So I do look at this as a more direct impact investment compared to the other investments, where broader investments, where we look at this as one slice. Unlike that, Zergratran has a much more broader and a more immediate impact investment opportunity. So that's how I look at this.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, I would. I like what Harry said in regards to values, right? So basically, the way I look at it is investing in the values of the company and the values of the people. Okay, so how do you impact? How do you impact the
I think
coming
Maduka
in?
probably, okay, he's back.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I drop off a little bit? Yeah, my internet is a little unstable. Sorry about that. So, so we want to be able to impact the people. If the company comes in with the right values, you multiply those values as well. Okay, so we come in with the right values, we influence the region positively with our values. Impact can come through how you affect the community. It can come through how you affect the community through its financials as well. We're creating a middle class. We're creating jobs. We're at least building it. And for me, that impact is gives a voice to people. Okay, it gives a voice to the people through what they earn, dignity. I'm not saying there isn't dignity now, but we're going to enable the increase of what is considered dignity. And when you have dignity and when you have ownership, you tend to create. So when we help influence a people or community to create, it's a beautiful thing. It's like planting a tree in a forest, and then you create a forest from it. That's impact. Okay, being sustainable is one thing. It's like planting a tree and cutting it down, and planting it again and cutting it down. But planting a tree, enabling it to grow and become a forest and truly change the landscape. That's what I see Zergratran doing through its technology, and through providing solutions that also help a people and a region, and changes the way goods move in Central America.
Thank you. I think this is what we really appreciate you of, and grateful to have you as an investors, because having a smart investment is having people who bring additional value, sharing thoughts, and then guiding the whole team in a different ways. And impact is important for us, but values are something that is guiding us when we work on this project. What you generally wouldn't say for the infrastructure projects of this size, but just because of I think the team, the investors that we have, the people who are on the call every week, we believe that this is the best way going forward, and this is the way how we actually work with everyone. And by knowing that, investors are probably going to ask, once you invest, what's happening after that? How do we stay in touch? And we know that we talk a lot. Aside from the weekly meetings, we're constantly in touch. But I would love to ask you to share with everyone, what are your post-investment activities, and how are you personally engaged with Zergratran on a weekly basis and going forward? And how does that part of connection with the Zergratran look like?
Yeah, on weekly, we're in meetings with the board and investors, discussing the challenges at each phase and what the strategy is moving forward. I think as an investor, being involved in that, like I said earlier, there's great responsibility with that as well. So you tend to be careful about what you say, but you want to make sure that your contribution is positive and moves the company forward to solve problems and meet these challenges so that we can hurdle them with ease. So for me, it's really important as an investor to be involved, and it's good to hear the smart people in the room, the smart people that are much smarter than I am, that are experts in the area, converse and discuss how to overcome challenges, and so that's important to me.
And I have to agree with you completely, because this is one of the well that we receive from you and Hari as well, being an expert in your own industry and knowing much more than the other team members is really adding value, not just in those discussions, but planning the long-term strategy, making the action plans, knowing how our next steps are looking forward. Having you in those meetings when we discuss is adding a huge value, because everyone is contributing with some specific guides that help us go further step by step. So we really appreciate that, and thank you for that. Hari, what's your opinion about that whole engagement, and how are you engaged? And I know you and I talk a lot, so maybe you can share about your experience in being engaged with the company after the investment.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to talk about first my level of engagement with other companies where I've invested, because I think there are some lessons from that. Generally, most companies today focus on the financial returns. I think they provide you with the various documents at the end of the year, and sometime in the middle of the year there is a communication. In some cases there are meetings, maybe once a year you go and meet with some of the key team members. So that's been my experience. More emphasis on the financial returns and not so much on what exactly is happening qualitatively. So my expectation from Zergratran, and given the scope and the nature of this project, is that we have broader communications. I think I am very pleased with the level of engagement that I have with the company as an investor, and access to senior leaders like yourself. There is a clear structure of regular meetings. And my expectation is that as we broaden the investor base, we cannot have the same level of communication with every single investor. So what I'm expecting is that using social media, using other techniques and technologies, we will evolve a way to communicate regularly with our investors, and we will understand that the concerns of the investors are broad. We have to be sensitive to the motivations for people to make the investments, and we need to make sure that our communication protocol addresses all of the issues, and I'm pretty confident that we will evolve and find a way to keep our investor base completely informed on what's happening, both in terms of the frequency of the communication as well as the content and the scope of what we are covering in that. So I'm very pleased with what we have today, and I'm pretty excited about what we will create as a communication infrastructure to communicate regularly with our investors.
Thanks, Hari. I think this was really helpful for everybody who's interested or has been thinking about investing in Zergratran. At this point, I don't have any other questions, but do you have anything else to add or maybe share any thoughts that I haven't asked so far?
I'm fine. I think you've covered pretty much everything.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's a good opportunity, and if you have the ability to do so, this will be the right time to invest in this project that is going to have tremendous impact in the region.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maduka and Hari. Thank you for everything, not just for today, for joining us and having this conversation. I also want to say thank you for everybody else who will be watching this, who is inquiring about Zergratran, who's looking at investing. If you are looking for more information, reach us out. Let us know. We're open to meet with you. Our team is really open to talk to anybody who's interested to learn more. And so we'll look forward to hearing from you. If you want to keep following and listening to what we share and information that we share with the world, feel free to do that every week. We will be talking to our investors, to leading people in the industry, with the leadership and high-level officials from the governments who will be sharing their thoughts about the project as well. So feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to talk to you. But thanks again, and thank you. We wish you a great day, and we'll be talking to you soon.
Thank you, Katerina. Thank you, Maduka.
Thank you.